Hi, and thank you for joining us for this episode of the State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. That is Robert Hilliard. I am Whitney Wiley, and we are here on Thursday talking all things leadership, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. And this week, we are going to be talking about hiring, effective hiring, things that you can do to help create your dynamic team. Some of the things we're going to talk about you would think would be obvious as a part of this, but I'm going to just say this, Robert. I spent a couple of days this week training HR managers and members of HR teams, hiring managers, managers in general. And some of these things are currently not practiced as much as one would think. And I I don't know, maybe from your experience you could speak on this, but I think some of it is we don't really get training in how to conduct, even if you are um, a hiring manager, particularly if you are a hiring manager, right? That if your HR doesn't have an active training program to help you with this, you may not be actually implementing some of the things that we're going to talk about today and avoiding things that we're going to talk about. And I certainly know from my experiences that I have worked with hiring managers. I've been on panels, and some of the things that just seem very straightforward were not a part of those processes. So we want to help you, hire effectively, get the people that you want. But Robert, your opening thoughts.
I agree with you. I remember years ago I was working for an organization, and they wanted me to train their managers in how to interview. And I was doing my needs assessment before I pulled the training together, and I was kind of trying to gauge what they knew about interviewing. And I have to tell you, about 95% of people that I interviewed were just basically going off of things like first impressions, how someone looked, whether they, which, I'll talk more about that later, and whether or not they had common cultural things with that person, which is a big
Yeah.
no-no. So they were basing it off of those things. And I had to, while I was gathering that data, I had to correct them and say, no, that you cannot be doing that. You should not be doing that. You definitely don't want to ask somebody what country they're from. That's a no-no. You don't want to ask somebody what age they are. That's a no-no. So I had to, while I was gathering that data, I had to school them in, you can't ask these illegal questions. So
Right. Right. And the questions are one aspect of this. Um, the things that you can't ask, but the way you ask the questions. And we're going to talk about a couple of different types of questions that you want to make sure that you ask, that you sprinkle all types of questions in. I think, and not having a plan, I think is a huge part of this, not just on the interviewing aspect, but sort of a plan and a process from beginning to end. So as an entrepreneur or as a hiring manager, when you come to the realization that you have a vacancy that you need to fill, and if you are in an organization that has an HR, you go and get in contact with HR, who's supposed to be your partner in this, right? You contact HR and say, I have a vacancy, and take the time to understand what the process is, right? From both the organization's perspective and from the applicant or the candidate's perspective, right? What is your perceived timeline? What can be done to streamline the process? Right now, we are in a market where acquiring talent is a challenge. Right? There is a challenge. And anything that you can do to expedite the process, make it more effective for your candidates, that conveys your brand values is going to help you, right, with the quality candidates, because everybody, that's who everybody wants, right? The quality. And if you want quality candidates, you have to be a quality employer that's going to attract them. And so we're going to talk about these things from that perspective. Things that you can do, strategies that you can do that will help you to be that, right? To be the employer that people want to work for.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's go ahead and get this started. We're going to, again, talking about effective hiring for dynamic teams. And we're going to be talking about strategies that you can implement that will help you get there. So one of the first places you want to start, right? You've got a vacancy, or you created a vacancy. Maybe it's part of the strategic plan that you are going to be creating new positions to help move your organization forward. And your department was the blessed one to have some extra positions created, right? So you want to make sure that you have a job description, right? It starts with the job description. I want to say two things here. One, the job description is not the job announcement, right? They are two totally different things. The job announcement is created from the job description, but it starts with the job description, right? So it needs to be clear. You need to define what the job is. And from that, you're going to be talking about outlining the responsibilities, the required skills, and the qualifications. Because you're going to then create this job announcement. And the point of the job announcement is not just to say, hey, I have a job. Everyone who's looking for a job, apply for this job. You want your job announcement really to connect with the candidates who are truly suitable for the role that you are looking to fill. And the other part of the job announcement is that it sets expectations from the start, right? So if you lay out what it is you're looking for, what is expected of the person who ultimately gets the job, you can have the conversations when you get to the interview stage that allow you to focus in on what you're looking for and what the candidate is looking for.
Agreed. I think to add to that, when you're building the job description, really think about not only the technical aspects of that, but who those people are going to be interacting with, because and how what they do will feeds into somebody else's job. Sometimes we forget that. We look at jobs in a vacuum, and it's just like they're just cleaning the floors or whatever it is, but that has an impact on other departments, and they need to interact with those people. And you may not think that communication skills go into that. They certainly do.
And here's the thing that I would further add. It's not just the qualifications, right? So Robert is talking about how this position interacts with other positions. And really think about this, what are the qualities, right? Aside from the skills, what are the qualities that a successful person in this role will have? And sometimes that gets lost, right? We're so focused on if they have X number of years of experience or a particular degree or certifications, whatever the education is, and lose sight of what's going to make this person successful in this role. And to the point that Robert was making, if they're going to be interacting with other people, they need to be a team player, right? What does that mean in your organization. And sometimes we'll just throw out the words, and it's fine to say looking for a team player, but what does that mean for your organization? What does that mean for your particular team? And if that means, collaborating on a daily basis, or, working closely with people to make sure that projects are completed in a timely fashion, deadlines, articulate what that actually means rather than just throwing out the buzzwords. Because what you think is a team player, someone else may not think is a team player. And again, it's about setting those expectations right from the start, right? Letting people know this is what we're expecting of you. And I'm somewhere thinking, if I'm looking at a job announcement, ultimately, if I don't want to do that, I'm not applying for the job, right? Or if I feel like I'm really not capable of doing that, I'm more likely than not going to not apply for the job. So you want to make sure that the job description, ultimately the job announcement, identifies what your required qualifications are and what the preferred qualifications are. What are the additional things that are going to set a candidate apart from others, right? So if you get, 50 resumes and everyone has all the required, probably not really going to happen, but let's just say they all had all the required qualifications, and then some had preferred some of the preferred qualifications, right? That starts to set the candidates apart. So you want to make sure you're articulating both of those skills, competencies, but qualities as well, right? And this is where, and we talk about this a lot, the importance of potential in your team members, the ability to learn, to grow, that you're not just looking for what people have done in the past, but you want to start to call out and weed out people based on what they can do in the future, what their potential is moving forward.
Agreed. I was going to add something to this, but this is only slide 2, so I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
Then I will say this last thing about the job announcement aspect of this. This is an opportunity for you to promote your company, promote the brand of your company, right? The job announcement is as much a declaration of a open position, and here is what we need in this. It is as much that as it is an opportunity for you to market your organization and why anyone would want to come and work for you, right? So an important part of this is some information about the company, your values, why anyone would want to come work for you, the work that you're doing, the mission, the vision of your organization. One of the things that we've learned and has really been highlighted over the course of the last few years is how important values are to talent. Right? We went through the Great Resignation and the quiet quitting and all the things, which all tie back to values mismatch. And if you can set the stage for the value alignment, right? The alignment of what's important both to the company and ultimately your employees, you set the stage early. Right, you're going to have a more successful chance at getting who you really want, and someone that's going to come in and bring their best, bring their A game to work on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
All right. So now we're going to move into shored up your job description. The HR has turned it into a job announcement. It's been posted. You've got resumes that have come in. Whatever the process is that you use, which makes me think I didn't actually create a slide about that process, but the process to decide who you're going to interview, right? And that there's a process for that as well. But once you've made the decisions about who you're going to interview, right, you want to make sure that your interview process is legal, it's efficient, it's consistent, right? And that you are using it to get to the core of the matter, which is someone who is going to fit within your organization as a whole, on your team particularly, can do the job, can grow into other potentially other opportunities within your organization. And the way you're going to do that is having a process, a whole process. And so we're going to talk about what that can look like for you.
Absolutely. And when we talk about process, it needs to be something that is consistent. I like to call them frameworks, right? Because within the framework, you can have some flexibility in there, but it should follow a pretty standard format.
I agree, right? And so one of the things that I think is really important, going back to losing quality talent, potential talent in this process, is communicating what that process is. What does it look like? What's the expected timeline, the time frame for this, so that someone that is not sitting around waiting to hear back from you, right? That when there's an interview or a second interview, something that I think is really important is to set that time frame up before the job actually is posted, right? And this is something I think enough people don't think about. And so when you're working with HR, you're having one interview, two interviews, three interviews. What are you doing? Who's going to be on those interviews? Are they panel interviews? Are they one-on-ones? Is each step progressive? And think about, is there going to be, are you doing it by phone, video, in person, right? Think about all the pieces and plan out ahead of time. And so you can say, we're looking to, and I've seen some announcements that say this, most don't, but some that do, is that we're reviewing resumes from, X date to X date. We anticipate interviews on whatever the date certain. Sometimes it's a range, sometimes it's a particular day. What that does is it puts your candidates on notice to block that day or those days out on their calendar, right, ahead of time. And you already have it on your calendar, rather than trying in the middle of this, trying to pull people together and see if you can get on each other's calendar, right? And I've been a part of those where we didn't interview for weeks out because that was the first time we could get everybody on the same page. That's in the middle of the process. So instead of figuring that out in the middle, set it up at the beginning. Anything on that aspect, Robert?
No, I think you did a really good job explaining that and talking about the importance of doing it.
And so that's part of being consistent, right? That's part of having a plan. That's part of, I think, conveying to your candidate pool the value that you have for them and their time. Then as it relates to getting into the interviews, right? Looking at the types of interview questions that you're going to ask. And Robert alluded to this earlier about some of the kinds of questions you don't want to ask, right? But the question then is, what kinds of questions do you want to ask? And I would say that you want to ask a mix of questions: behavioral questions, situational questions, and technical questions. And if you're thinking, Whitney, what the heck is a technical question? What's a situational question? And what's a behavioral question? Well, we have answers for you. We actually have answers for you. So behavioral questions, most people probably have heard of. These have been, and Robert, you might know more than I would. I'm just thinking of my own experiences, probably really getting into behavioral questions sometime within the last 20 years or so.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah, behavioral interview questions are they are my favorite because it really talks about past behavior predicting what someone will do in the future. If you ask someone most people ask questions like, "Well, tell me about yourself." We've heard that one before, and of course, everyone's going to talk about themselves in the most favorable light, or they should. But a lot of people ask questions like, "Well, are you a good communicator?" I'm amazing. That's what most people will say. But a behavioral question will be more like, tell me about a time you had to communicate a really complicated process to a coworker. How did you do that? Walk me through your process. That's a behavioral interview question. And usually if people give you generalities, what I do is I say, give me a specific time on a specific project that you had to do that.
Absolutely. I love behavioral questions as well. And for just that reason, technical questions can help to that in to some extent with that as well. So you can ask them to explain the process you would follow to, let's say, debug a software issue. Right. So you're asking and not, when I mean technical, don't mean technology technical necessarily, but that kind of thing. How would you, or can you explain the process that you use to plan an event, just so that I can give you an example that is not technology technical, because I don't want you to get lost in that, right? But a technical question assesses a candidate's specific job-related skills and expertise. And absolutely, to Robert's point, is you don't want to ask someone close-ended questions where they're going to at least attempt to give you the answer they think you want to hear. So if you ask someone, can you debug a complex software issue, they're probably going to say yes, right? If they're applying for a job that has anything to do with software development, or planning an event. Can you plan complex events, multi-day events? Well, of course I can. So then if you're going to ask that sort of closed-ended question, at least have the follow-up be the technical question. How would you go about doing that? Right. And then situational questions are, you present a hypothetical and you then evaluate how the candidate would answer a potential challenge. Right. So imagine you are leading a project and you receive conflicting requests from two major stakeholders. How would you handle this? Right. Because it may be that if you ask these questions solely as behavioral questions, they may not have an experience that lends itself to that. But a lot of things that you want to find out, particularly about people's interactions with other people, maybe less on the technical side or the actual task related side of their job, But particularly when it comes to behaviors, right? Actions and interactions with other people, the behavior questions will let you evaluate how they have navigated challenging situations, particularly with other people, and questions that are really good. So here's an example. I'll go through all three scenarios: close-ended and open-ended, right? Do you like working on a team? Well, yes, I remember that, ding, ding, ding. Oh, the job announcement said teamwork was important. Yes, I love working as a part of a team, right? Doesn't tell you anything. A behavior-based question: can you tell us about a time where you were a part of the team and things didn't go well? What did you do and what did you learn from that? Right? It gives you an opportunity, and you're asking for an example. So they have to pull something from their experience that will communicate to you exactly what it is that they've done in the past. Asking that in a situational context, you can say, suppose you are a part of a team and one of the team members is not pulling their weight. How would you handle that? Right? So you can ask, how would they handle that? If a candidate has prepared well, not only will they answer that question, but they'll bring an example from their past of how they've done that. And then a technical way maybe to ask that question is, can you explain the process of getting people on your team to actually pull their weight, right, to do their part? And again, they can answer that question, and if they have experiences, examples that they can bring from the past, they will bring that into it. So look to have a mix of those kinds of questions, right? Open-ended, closed-ended, behavioral, situational, and technical questions. This is going to help you really flesh out what it is you need to know. I'm going to say this as a foundation. Before you get started drafting your interview questions, be clear about what matters. What are you looking for? What's important in terms of their abilities, their potentialities, and the soft skills as well as those hard skills, right? And make sure that everyone on the interviewing teams, the panels, are on the same page. So that may mean having some training sessions ahead of time. It may mean something that I think could be really important, and probably should have moved this here. It is using ratings, right? Because what you want is for everyone that is on a panel to be on the same page. That's what you want. And you can use technology to help you do that, right? There's software that can help you do that. You could use rating sheets. I've been in interviews and on panels where it's been done like tons of different ways. It doesn't matter so much how you do it. What matters is that you do it.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of ratings. I use them and instruct hiring managers to use them as well. I suggest that to them. You want to be careful with that, though, because when we talk about biases, we'll get into that a little bit, but you want to make sure that you have a rating system that is fair. And basically how I've used it is, you have the question, you rate how they answer that question. It gives you a way to look at things when all is said and done, and say, okay, I've asked the same. This is why it's important to ask the same questions, right? So that you ask the same questions, you can see how they answer them. Of course, you're taking detailed notes when you're doing that, so that when you're finished, you have a way of comparing how they answered those questions.
Yeah.
Very good.
Anything else on the interview process you want to
No,
address?
I love the regularly review and improve. That's something that people don't do enough. You really need to look at whatever process you have, whether it's your coaching process, whether it's your training process, whether or not it's your management or leadership process. You should be looking at it, looking at what's working, what you could do better, and getting some feedback about those things. And when you do that, the feedback should be coming from some people that you've interviewed. Those people, they're now part of, hopefully, part of your organization. You can poll them and say, hey, how was that process for you? If you were giving me feedback on that, what could I have done better? What would improve the process? What didn't you like about it? What did you like about it? And if you're on a panel, or if you frequently do that with a panel, ask those folks that are on the panel with you, what can we do to streamline the process, to make it more effective, to make it more even more welcoming. One of the things that I used to like to do when I had was interviewing people was to tell them how the interview was going to play out. And I was very straightforward about that. I don't want you to be nervous. I want you to come in and unless they're going to be a firefighter or work in nuclear regulatory, where you want them to have that really, that grace under pressure. I don't want them to be nervous. I want them to be relaxed so I can get some honest, truthful answers to the question. You'd be very surprised how people answer questions, how honest people are when they feel relaxed.
Absolutely. I love that. And I think there's, for some people, sort of it's like a gotcha, it's a test rather than a conversation, right? And what you want is to find the person that fits in to your team. And I think you're right, Robert, unless that is the nature of the job, really, there's no need to put people under that kind of pressure. And I know there have been some stories in the news about different approaches, particularly down in Silicon Valley, like weird questions that get asked because they want to catch people off guard. There's a place for that, right? But in the end, if whatever you choose to do doesn't get you to the heart of what matters for a successful employee in that role, there's no point of doing that. It's just a gimmick. It's just a gimmick. And so to your point about the regular review and improving, getting feedback, taking the time after each candidate finishes, you want to have conversation right then, right? Yeah, so schedule your interviews in such a way that you have opportunity to have the discussion, at least a general discussion about your impressions of each candidate so that it's fresh in your mind, because the more people you interview, the more that starts to get lost. And then you can't remember who did what, who said what, and what your impressions were. So, regardless of whether you're using ratings or you're just making notes, when you're done with each candidate, have a brief conversation. If this is a panel, flesh out your notes a little bit more so that when you have the in-depth discussions about who you're going to move forward to the next interview phase, or who you ultimately want to extend an offer to, that you're really clear about who you're referring to, and it doesn't get lost in all, in an extended parade of candidates.
Absolutely. And to your point about our point about trying to make people nervous during the interview, I once did an interview where the hiring manager would ask me a question and then open his eyes really wide and lean into me like that. And I think I got the job because after the sixth time he did, I just started laughing. I was like, I don't understand. It just was not intimidating me. I just thought it was pretty hilarious that the person was doing that. but that some
Like
people
you're just creepy. You're just creepy. That's all.
weird. I guess it was like, let me put you on the spot, and it's like, well, I already had a job, so it was like, I'm not. It's not making me nervous. I found it to be humorous. So watch
It
your
just
body.
makes me wonder why. Why would you have even wanted to work with him? But that's another question for another time.
Absolutely, yeah, we'll talk about that cultural fit. So,
Go
so
ahead.
we'll talk about that.
Um,
Yeah,
so the cultural fit, right? This is basically you looking to see whether or not the candidate's values and their work style aligns with your company culture. I I added this second slide with some more in-depth things about culture fit because there can be when you say that there can be a downside, which is that you end up with a bunch of people that are all the same, that think the same, that talk the same, that have the same experience. And that's not what we're talking about with culture fit, right? The core values, yes. But how those are expressed and interpreted, right, leaves a wide open wide possibilities of how that shows up in your organization.
I think one of the things that people fail to do, or should do a lot more than they do, is really give the organization's culture a critical look. What exactly is the culture? You'd be surprised at how many people don't actually know the culture, because of two reasons. A, they didn't stop to do any kind of analysis once they got the job, and they're just kind of doing their thing, or they've been in the job for so long that the culture has become invisible to them. It's just part of how they do their thing. And I always think of it like this, and I tell people, particularly the folks that I coach that are moving from one job to another, even in the same industry. I'm like, be mindful of the culture, and I, if I'm instructing them, because coaching is really not instructing, but if I get into that point where they want me to educate them a little bit, I'll say, think of it like you're going into another country. What are the things that you would do if you were going into another country? You would learn the language, you would learn the do's and don'ts. It's the same thing when you're going into another organization. So really understand your culture. What's the language of your culture? What are the do's and don'ts? How do people work? What's the preferred way that the organization wants people to work? That is your culture, pretty much in a nutshell.
And to that point, questioning, right? You're saying questioning, looking at it, but questioning, is this really the culture that we want? And while it's not the time in the middle of interviewing to try to flip the script on that, taking the time to understand what really matters, right? So, a work ethic, what does that mean? Inclusivity is one of the things that is thrown around today. What does that mean, right? Asking the questions of what that means. Again, what it means to you may be different than what it means to me, and so it's not just a matter of throwing out, vague words and phrases, but tapping into what really matters. And if what you're espousing is what's actually being enacted. And so while you can look for people that fit within your organization, how you go about finding those people, it becomes your challenge, right? Because you still want to embrace different perspectives. You actively want to see candidates with different backgrounds, different experiences, and viewpoints. because that's what leads to creativity and innovation. But if innovation is not a value, if it's not something that you want, then bringing people in who value innovation and creativity, there's going to be a clash, there's going to be a mismatch, and those people are not likely to stay. If they can't have an impact and change that, they're going to be disillusioned and ultimately go. And so you've got to be clear about what it is you want. And taking the time to think about not just here in the moment, but over the long term. And so how can you do that? Making sure that you involve your team, right? In the interviewing, reviewing resumes, right? Having different people with different perspectives look at who ultimately gets a chance or an opportunity to join your team. I think about the processes that I've been on where there were 3 of us reviewing resumes, each of us doing it individually, and then we would come together. And how, as much as we worked well together as a team, the 3 of us, when it came to identifying who we thought would be great additions to the team, we weren't always on the same page 100%, and that's okay. Where we were in alignment, those people automatically got interviews. And the interesting part came when we got past the ones we were in agreement on and having the discussions about why do you think this person would be great in this job, right? And then saying, you know what, I hadn't thought about it that way. I can see your point. I'm good with us interviewing them. And then seeing after the interview if what we thought bore itself out. And so you don't need to be afraid that, including more people and more perspectives is going to tear your culture down. It depends on what it is you're trying to build, what it is that you want.
Yeah, and to your point, I don't think you should all agree, right? I think there should be some tension there because that's how you are going to, whenever there's complexity, I love complexity or talking about it. You need those different perspectives because they're going to point out things that you didn't notice. And that could be the deciding factor or the thing that makes that candidate fantastic. We get caught up in looking for people or wanting to be around people that always agree with us. We do that in our relationships. We do it on the job. And I will tell you that as a former teenager, being around people that always agreed with me made me make some really stupid errors. So you want to have people that think differently than you do or can contrast your ideas because that will shed some light on new things.
And I want to say this before we leave Culture Fit, right? So I have a bullet, inclusive culture fit assessments, right? And this is about redefining what fit can be for you. Adaptability, right? Openness to learning, right? So you get to decide what this is. And so you don't want people who are not adaptable, right? If you decide adaptability is a value or something that's important, then you don't want people that are not adaptable, but how they express their adaptability is a different thing. And I agree with you, Robert, that having people with some differing viewpoints, perspectives, not always agreeing is a good thing as long as it's done respectfully. And I would say even in those moments where I was talking about resume reviews, even in those moments when we were reviewing resumes and we agreed on candidates, we didn't necessarily agree on them for the same reasons. And so, you can be in agreement and it not be in agreement for the same reasons. And that's okay as well. The bottom line is you have to figure out what matters, what the values are, what the cultural aspects you are looking to make sure you have people that fit within for a number of reasons, but you're not looking for them to come in and be lockstep and end up with groupthink. That's not the goal. The goal is so that you can work together and figure out how to work together.
Whitney, as much as I like to be right, I appreciate it when you have a different perspective because it makes me think. And that, and it's because we agree on a lot of things, but we don't agree on everything. And
No.
I appreciate those
You're
moments.
wrong. You're wrong.
I appreciate those moments because if you're going through whatever your process is and you're used to being right, or you think you're always right, you're gonna have a problem when you realize, because it will eventually happen when you're not correct. You're gonna really have a problem doing that. I want to pivot and ask you a question, Whitney. Whitney, we're at 46 minutes right now. Do you think this is going to be warrant a part two? Because I know we're about halfway through.
Would you like to do a part two? Let's do a part two.
Yeah, because we're digging into some of these things, and I think that it would be good to do a part two. This is a
let's
new
do
thing
a part two.
It's a new thing. We're agreeing, right? So this is a new thing for us. We've only had one 2-part episode, but I think this is important enough to do a 2-part episode.
Then let's do a 2-part episode. We can end here with Culture Fit, and we can plan to do the remaining aspects in a part 2 of this episode.
Yeah, I think so.
Look at you. Look at you. And then getting me to agree.
I'm not you just really recognize an excellent idea.
Oh, lucky me. I love that. Absolutely. Right. Because we have a culture. We have a culture. Right. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you keeping an eye on the time as well. And so then let's wrap up with this one last thing. I would add before we go on this culture fit, the psychological safety, right? Again, creating an environment, fostering an environment where employees feel safe to express their ideas and perspectives without fear of judgment, and creating an environment where employees bring their whole selves to work. We talk about that a lot, right? What you want in your workforce is for people to bring their full self, their best selves to work every day. And the environment that you create either supports that or hinders that. And so taking the time to think about whether or not the people that you are interviewing are going to help support that environment. Again, they don't have to agree 100%. Right? That's not what we're talking about here. You don't have to agree 100%, but you do need to come with some basics about valuing other people's perspectives and opinions, right? We're talking about respect, and that if you don't agree with someone, that you don't talk all over them, walk all over them, denigrate their perspectives, that you what's the word I'm looking for, Robert? I'm looking for a particular word. It's not coming to me.
Not demonize.
Anyway, respect. I'll just go with respect, right? Okay. That you respect and honor that they see things differently. You don't have to agree, but you don't have to put them down, right? And so being inclusive, being open, being respectful ultimately, that's what you're looking for. You're not looking for groupthink, and you're not looking for the culture fit. Doesn't mean homogeny, homogeneity, one of those. Homogeneous.
Homogeneous.
You're not looking for everyone to be the same. How about
that? Oh, that's what you get for using those big, what they call them, 50-cent words, right? Homogeneous.
So if you're watching, you can correct me. Go ahead, put it in the chat, whatever. I'm good. I'm good. Right. I am humble enough to know that I don't know everything.
Absolutely.
And it's all good. You know what I'm reading? You know what I'm reading?
What are you reading now?
Surrender Experiment.
Oh, okay.
So we're done talking about the effective brain before we wrap up. But I'm reading the Surrender Experiment.
Okay.
And I just finished reading, I don't have it here, but I just finished reading another book by this author, Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul. And basically, did you read that? Did you recommend that to me?
No, I didn't recommend that to you, but we had talked about it.
I can't figure out, no one will own up to recommending that book to me. I don't know why. So anyway, I read it. I thought it was great. And in the end, you know, I was talking with my husband about it. He's like, well, wrap it up. In the end, it's what I walked away was with let it go. Right. You know, there are just some things we have to let go of. And it is our holding on to things, clinging to things, or resisting things that create so much of the angst that we have in life. And so I'm reading his second book, and this one tells the story sort of how he came to his life philosophy and what's in the Untethered Soul. So I say that to say, bring the comments on about the homogeneity. I'm good.
Yeah, and of course, you know, your book choice is appropriately woo-woo. You have been really good at recommending those types of books to me, because you know I'm like, I'm like 30% on those types of things, and I put that book in my my list of books that I'm going to be reading. So.
Don't put my woo-woo books on your list and leave them on your list.
No.
While you spend all your time on strategy and complexity and all that stuff.
Listen, I always feel that, you know, the people watching the show are probably like, what are they talking about? But you know, I always think that there's a balance of those things.
There is a balance.
And I think that's why we work together. You're more into that stuff, and I'm, you know, not to say that you're not into the science stuff, because you are, but you like that stuff and it connects with you. And I am stiff and nerdy, so I really like the science stuff. So it's a good match.
It is a good match. We are a good match. It's helpful to have both, because none of us are all one thing, right? And I think, you know, as we wrap this up, and I keep saying that, the more we think that we are binary, right, that we're one thing or the other, we're on or off, you know, this or that, the more we lose sight of the full breadth of who we are and who we can be, right? And so it takes the science and it takes the spirit in order to make us fully who we are. And we may ebb to one side more than the other, but we can't negate the other side. And I think a lot of what happens with burnout and people feeling unappreciated is that we're trying to fit in these boxes to be a particular way rather than just being who we are, right? And the more we can be who we are, let go of the other stuff, the better we become as who we are. And that allows us to lead better, which is what I'm all about, what you're all about. Well, that's what we're all about here, right? Is
Truly.
leading better. So be better so you can lead better. Embrace the totality of who you are. That's all. That's all. And let the rest of it go. Let the rest of it go.
I couldn't have
There you
said it. I couldn't have said it better.
So with that, right, I'm going to let you guys go. I know you're like, okay, lady, you talked long enough. Robert, if someone wanted to get in touch with you and work with you on the science stuff, right, and tap into the woo-woo, how would they go about doing that?
They can reach out to me at inspireme@roberthilliardcoaching.com, or just go to Robert Hilliard Coaching and fill out the contact form. Let me know what goals you have, what challenges you're experiencing, and we can set up a time where we can do a discovery call and just really see if we're a good fit for each other.
There you go. If you're a little bit science and a little bit woo-woo, Robert's your guy. I'm trying to think a little bit. What was that? The Osmonds. I'm a little bit country and
rock and roll. Yeah.
So that's what this is. A little bit science, a little bit woo-woo.
I mean, I heard that's what they used to say. I didn't see it. I heard that's.
Sure. You were there every Saturday night watching the Osmond family show. I know you were. And it's okay. It's okay. And your woo-woo side, it's okay. But if you would like to be a little bit woo-woo and a little bit science instead of a little bit science, a little bit woo-woo, you can reach out to me, shiftingintoaction.now.site. And if you are interested, there are a couple of ebooks there that are my gift to you. Feel free to complete the form and set up a time to have an exploratory call with me. And with that, we have really officially reached the end of our time together. Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. We are here with you. And until next time, take care.
Bye now.